Welcome to the Lean and Agile Thinking for NGOs and Nonprofits interview with Dr. Jeffrey Leiker and Dr. Andrew Parris, Chapter 5. In this final chapter, we discuss lean learning and deployment strategies for NGO leaders and frontline teams.
If someone out there is interested, they're intrigued, they like what they hear, but they're not sure. We're not asking people with lean to take a leap of faith. What we're asking is to say, how would you experiment? How would you prove this concept? And years ago, I think it was in the field book, the Lean Leadership field book, you published a chapter that fascinated me where you suggested a model, actually 4 different approaches where organizations would adopt or transform themselves. At one time, you even framed it as there are organic ways of doing this and there are mechanistic ways of doing this. And that one always stuck with me. And when Andrew and I were preparing for this session, we both remembered that and recalled that what has worked best for us to get started are the 2 pieces of the model that you called hot problems and a model line. Now, I'm going to ask for you to explain what those terms mean. But hot problems and model line will get an organization hopefully to the point where they say, okay, we've tested this, we've road tested it, it worked. And we've generated enough good results that people in the organization are getting curious, that they maybe want some of this too. But where do you go from there? How do you take those localized successes and help an organization go further and broader with them while developing internal capability, not relying so much on outsiders to help do it for you or do it to you?
Yeah, so in the new edition of the Toyota Way, in the preface, I distinguish between mechanistic and organic, and think about mechanistic as being technical system only, and organic being social and technical. So with the technical system, you're trying to fix technical processes to make things flow better, to reduce inventory, to reduce time, to improve productivity. So again, that's the non-systems thinking version where you think, if I change these 5 levers, like I install standard work and I create a work cell where things flow one by one through the cell, and I put up a board that has visual indicators on it, and I have a daily stand-up meeting. So you take these actions, and if I do these things, I'll get these results. And many multinational companies that have many different factories, their feeling is, I have to do this fast, for example, to please our board of directors, and I have to be able to show impact on data, and I have 30 different locations, and how do I impact these locations seriously within, say, a 1-year period? And I call that going 1 inch deep and a mile wide. And when you're spreading tools like that, you will get results if the person that's calling the shots and leading the transformation, if they have any degree of understanding and skill in the technical systems of lean, then they will get results, and it'll be spotty and maybe they vary, but they'll get results. Like inventory will go down, or productivity will go up, or perhaps quality will go up, or late shipments will be reduced. The problem is that you've changed things, and the people there who are on the front line, people doing the work, haven't mentally caught up with the changes because you have to go fast. So their job has changed, but they don't really understand how it's changed and what they're supposed to be doing now. And they also have existing habits. So shifting out of an old habit into a new habit is not easy to do for anybody. So what they're going to want to do as much as possible is what they did before. But now you've sort of rearranged their workplace and given them new metrics and new boards and new stuff to think about. So over time, they're going to tend to just revert back to what they were doing, what's comfortable for them, and they'll ignore your standard work, and they'll ignore your visual management boards, and they'll stop having the daily meetings. So that's that mechanistic approach that is 1 inch deep and a mile wide. And it's very fast and efficient, but not very effective because you're not really developing the people. You're not really dealing with the social system. And the technical system is changing much faster than the people can adapt to or adjust to or understand and develop new habits to deal with. On the other hand, what this model line approach is, and it's the approach that Toyota's group TSSC uses. So when they did, for example, the vaccines, there was an organization that was interested in helping the poor with medication, and they were setting up and they were an NGO, and they're setting up the Center for Vaccines at the time. And TSSC saw that, you talked about a hot project, they saw that as a big opportunity to teach this organization the value of lean, the basic concepts, the way of thinking. And they thought about that as a model line. Now it's in one place, whatever it was, under a tent in the football field, they're going to be giving out these vaccines in mass quantities. Here's an opportunity to show them what's possible and how we can transform this operation to a level of performance that they would have never imagined. And we're going to do it not in just a week through an event, but we'll set it up and then we'll keep on working on improving it over several months so you get better and better and better. But the people who are doing the work are going to be the ones who improve it. We're just going to coach them through that. So when they do that, they also have a few rules. One of the rules is that whoever's in charge, they have to talk to first. And they're going to ask that person, what is your vision for this organization? What is it you're trying to accomplish? What would great success look like 5 years from now? And then they're going to ask to have the patients to start in one place with one project. And that could take 6 months or more. And I want you to have the patients to let us do this so you can understand not just individual tools, but how the whole system works together, the social and the technical. And we'll make that happen like a mini Toyota within this one process. And the people doing the work and the people supervising them, they're going to experience it. And the supervisors are going to be leading the changes that they're going to have to sustain. Now, you as a senior leader need to go to the Gemba. I use the term Gemba for where it's actually happening. You need to go down there and enough times to see what's happening so you understand the transformation process, not just the results. And we're going to even give you some small projects to do so you can get your hands dirty. But you have to do that. And then we're going to have several meetings along the way where we reflect on what you've learned and seen. And by the end of this project, say 6 months from now, we're going to have another meeting where we discuss where to go next. And I'm not going to tell you how to spread this throughout your whole organization. You're going to tell me after having experienced it firsthand and seeing what it takes for not just the technical system, but for the people to learn how to continue to improve and to sustain these new systems. And then you can decide how many different processes can we take on and what time frame, and how many people you'll need to coach and teach. We'll work that out, but you're not in a position to know that right now because you've never seen this before. Even if you've seen specific process improvement tools, you haven't seen a whole system. So that's what they do. And then if the CEO or whoever's in charge says, I really don't have time for that. I brought you in thinking that you would set up our lean systems and get good results. But what you're asking me is a far bigger commitment than I have time for. Then the Toyota people are going to say, I understand that. I know you're a busy person. So thanks. Hopefully you got something out of this discussion. And good luck in the future. And they're going to walk away. They're going to say, this is not an environment where we can really be effective in teaching TPS lean. So if the senior leader is not willing to start small, actually see the whole system through, and in addition, be personally involved, then it's a no-go. If that person who's in charge, and hopefully is going to be in charge for a while, not replaced the day that the model line is finished by a different person who has no experience and didn't understand the process, then it's not going to work. But if that person does get involved, they find in every single case, without exception, and they've dealt with hundreds of different cases, that person changes. And whether it was the two people that started the construction business to build houses after Hurricane Katrina, and they saw that they could build houses twice as fast without additional resources, and they're better quality and they're on time, or the people that gave the vaccines and they dealt with another COVID type organization that was building ventilators, and they found out they could build 10 times as many ventilators with the same resources. So when you've experienced that and you look back, you say, wow. So then they can ask you, what have you learned from this? And they'll say, I never expected this. In my wildest dreams, I just never thought this was possible. What did you learn about the process? And they've learned some things about one-piece flow and standardized work, but they'll always say it really comes back to the way of thinking by the supervisors, by the frontline workers, and what they learned. And that's what I need to focus on. So now you can have an intelligent conversation with these leaders about planning for the next step and planning for the future.
What you just described is very much what you described at the very beginning about Toyota's long-term vision and playing towards that. And I know in my career, I've had more of the hot problems where they lead with the problem, and hopefully you're able to work the success of that back upstream to get into the boardroom, to get to the attention of the senior leaders, to help them understand what the long-term vision is. Only a few times have I seen it truly start from the top down, without having the gravitas of walking in with Toyota emblazoned on my shirt. But even when you do have, let's say, the CEO of a large NGO that wants to do this, ultimately, there are those institutional funders. Or in some cases, there are more the large private philanthropists, or they're doing their fundraising out more generally in the philanthropic marketplace. And no matter who you're talking to, either the USAIDs of the world, the institutions, or the charity navigators who are looking very carefully at overhead and cost reduction, oftentimes people development, training, coaching, consulting, education, to whatever extent these organizations can afford them and commit the time to them, are often considered as overhead. And those are considered non-value adding, to be eliminated or reduced if possible. And it seems like the whole key to this, not the whole key, but one key to this for success in the NGO world is to understand we've got to play the long game. The problems that we need to solve, we need to solve collectively for the planet, NGOs working together with governments, with private industry, location to location around the world, but there needs to be an overarching orchestrator to make that all come together. And that would seem to be the role of an NGO at the global level. But we need to develop these people and the capabilities and the vision and the funding to do that. Not asking you to solve this problem for us, but if you can share any insights from a senior leader Toyota view, what would Mr. Toyota say about this? What would the senior leader perspective say about the importance of playing the long game?
Well, as far as the importance, they would obviously could argue that why it's important to them, why it's been the reason for their success is because they are playing the long game and their competitors are not. But you mentioned that you're not in the position like I described with this TSSC organization, and you're not. You're right, and I've not been, and I've done consulting for many years, and I've rarely been in the same privileged situation they are, and partly because I'm not Toyota, partly because I had a consulting business and I wanted to keep people billing. And in Toyota, they don't care about that. This actual organization, TSC, is a not-for-profit, and they don't need to make a profit, so they can walk away from jobs. And because of Toyota, they get plenty of demand. so they can select their clients, which I couldn't do. So the hot jobs idea is, let's find a pain point and let's solve their problem. And it might be quickly, it might be focused primarily on the technical system, but just to get their interest, to whet their interest, so that they're willing to maybe have the next conversation that's moving in the direction of thinking long-term and developing people. So we have to kind of sell our way to the point where they'll buy the whole system. And we have the vacuum cleaner, and first we make a mess, we clean it up for them, and then we show them how they can clean up their mess. So it is more of a step-by-step process, and there is a value in using the technical tools to quickly get results, just to get interest, if that's what you need to do. As far as the top go, and we did a lot of work over the years for the Navy and the Air Force and military organizations, and they would always complain about the customer. Their customer was the Defense Department, the government, the procurement parts, and they would place all sorts of unreasonable restrictions on them, like to change something very simple, to create a cell, say, and physically move equipment around, would take, almost an act of the president, and it would take months to get, and we're trying to, in 1 week, do a workshop and move things around. And we would typically do is we would say, in preparation for this event, let's bring the customer in, see if you can get them to come here and talk to them. And what we usually would find is that their direct representative was much more reasonable than they thought. They had this sort of abstract view of the customer or the government or donors or whoever, but when you actually got a real person in the room and you can explain what you're trying to accomplish, they would more than likely not end up being pretty reasonable and say, no, that's not what we meant by these rules. We weren't trying to stop, improvement toward helping a service better. So, just directly talking to the customer, the donor, et cetera, is useful. Getting them to actually come and see when you're doing something like a model line project, getting them to come and see is very helpful. And it was sort of interesting. We did work at a nuclear submarine overhaul and repair operation in New Hampshire, and they were actually considering they had actually decided, and Congress had decided to close down the operation. We've been working with them for a while on how to more quickly repair and overhaul a submarine to get it back into action. And we were working in back shops that were doing small things like repairing, it turns out, ball valves. There's hundreds of ball valves for releasing water and all that. And they have to take those out and repair them and put them back on. So we're just working in that factory just for demonstration as a model line. And at some point, this small little shop that did these ball valves got recognized nationally by the Defense Department as being the best example in the Navy of lean. And the numbers were phenomenal in terms of not eliminating overtime, speed, how many they were able to do with the same number of people. By every measure, it was just phenomenal. So this little shop in a significant yard, but this little shop gets visits from the Admiral, the Navy, and the a senator from New Hampshire, and they're on the borderline with Portland, Oregon, and that senator came. So they have all these bigwig people. So they're presenting to them the results and the numbers, the PowerPoint, and then they go to the shop, and they started to and they had the people who were doing the work, who were repairing the ball valves, talked about how their lives had changed and all that they had learned, and they just ate it up. Like, they completely forgot about the PowerPoint presentation. And they're so affected by talking to real people who are doing real jobs and how their lives got better and how much better they felt about themselves and how empowered they felt to keep on improving. So getting some good success stories, but bringing people to the place to talk to real people who are delivering better value to the customer is really powerful. But you have to have, some examples in order to do that. At the same time, this whole system works best when you have a very stable leadership. Toyota doesn't react to shareholders the way other companies do. So they're kind of in an ideal situation. But at least this is what we're trying to accomplish. We need to work towards more stable leadership. People who understand the processes, who've learned problem solving, who understand the systems that we're setting up. We need to somehow involve the donors and get them to see firsthand what we're accomplishing and pull them into the process. And in the original version of the Toyota Way, I had a pyramid that showed after philosophy, I had process was the next level, then people, and then problem solving. Because I said, really, to teach people, to demonstrate, to get the leaders on board, you should really focus on the process and improving it and getting significant results that nobody could deny, as well as people who could talk about those results, who are doing the work. And then you start to get interest in higher levels, and then you'll start to get more resources to keep doing this. So I still think the starting point is somewhere, whether it's solving a hot problem, or whether it's to set up an actual model line, which takes longer and is a bigger investment of time. Having something you could show that's both a good process, good people, good results. That's all those things. And get people to come to see for themselves is the most powerful way of starting to win the political value battles to get support. But I'm not suggesting that it's an easy process or that there aren't many obstacles. And again, and actually going back to that kata model, there's the vision of where you want to go, and there's where you are. And then you end up in the model identifying obstacles. And then you prioritize the obstacles. And really the experimentation is to overcome the obstacles. So rather than throw up your hands and say, we can't do this because of all these obstacles, or rather than asking, we have these obstacles, Dr. Leiker, how do we solve them? We want to see people in the process identifying, be honest about the obstacles, and then overcoming them one by one. And they're not overcoming some abstract generic obstacle that NGOs have. They're overcoming this problem that their trucks broke down and they need to get the food to the customer. It's very specific. It's a real problem. And then as you solve enough of those, you start to develop the skills and way of thinking to solve bigger problems. But it does take patience. And I would sort of also turn it around and say, to be honest, when we're dealing with private companies and the key stakeholder is looking for return on their investment, in some ways that's a lot tougher problem than you have when you have donors who are giving bunches of money because they deeply care about the cause. So there is an advantage to that you should be able to take advantage of.
All right. So maybe I'll wrap up with maybe more of a comment, and you can make an observation rather than asking you a real question. One of the things that excites me about lean is the idea of building capacity. One of the big ideas, goals of NGOs, whether it's in humanitarian or development work, is what's called localization. And localization means partnering with local players, whether, again, humanitarian or development, or maybe community-based organizations, maybe governments, government clinics, for example, to build up their capacity and hand off the ability to design and implement programs to them. One of the things that excites me about lean is how thoroughly aligned this is with the Toyota goal of building up their suppliers. And whether it's partners versus suppliers, the point for me is the same. Toyota has developed this amazing capability, and they are trying to share it and build the capacity of their suppliers and as well as nonprofits through the shared service center. It's exciting to me that Lean aligns so well with this NGO goal of building up the capacity of those who are also able to do this, so that they're better able to do it, and ideally we can hand over more and more of the work to local players. So I'll wrap up with that observation.
Yeah. Let me go back to this submarine shipyard example, because I didn't really finish the story. So we worked with this one shop that did the ball valves. There are a few other shops, like somebody has to make out of metal the ducts for all the duct work for the heating and ventilation system, and that they saw what was happening in this shop, and then they asked for a little bit of support, and they, mostly on their own, they developed their own process of making these air ducts, much more quickly and efficiently and with high quality. And so there were pockets of lean developing in the shops. Then when they got, and our goal was, like you said, we were trying to develop their capability. We didn't want to do this for them. We weren't going to be around for forever. It was my student who was actually working on a dissertation, and he went and lived there for a while, and helped them with that one shop. But then we wanted them to take off on their own. And then I mentioned that Congress had decided to shut them down. And that created a crisis, which in their case, instead of giving up, they got even more energized. And they said, well, we've learned what lean can do in these shops. Now, if we want to save this site, let's see what we can do on the actual full submarine, which typically takes 2 to 3 years. And when it's going bad, it could take 3 years when they're expecting it to be done in 2 years. So they set a goal to do it in about 1.5 years. And they took the lessons they learned from the shop, and then they applied them to all the work on the submarine itself, which is big stuff like the engine room and overhauling that. And they basically took the same concepts and applied it, and they were now leading this, and they were able to do it within the 1.5 years. And it was the first time it was ever done. And the result was that Congress actually reversed their decision, and they kept them open. So that was, obviously, not every story is a success story like that, but it was a big success story for us, where we really did teach them starting small, and then they were able to scale it up. And really, that's always our goal. So when Toyota works with a supplier, or if Toyota works with a NGO that's building houses or giving out vaccines, their goal is always the same, which is to teach through on-the-job development. And the teacher has to think like a coach and not like an expert. And I think that's one of the differences between Lean and some other versions, say, of Six Sigma, is that the goal I've seen in certain cases of Six Sigma is for a black belt who has this very high level of expertise to come in and solve your problems. And with Lean, my goal is to use the simplest methods possible to teach you how to make visible your problems and solve the problems yourself. And you have to start someplace. So I would start, if I had a country where there's all sorts of corruption and all sorts of bad things happening, I would do what I could, which you're doing anyway. I wouldn't stop doing whatever you're doing. But I might see an opportunity in some small village to have a demonstration project where there's a leader that really is hungry to learn. And for that one case, I might go further and provide some support to help them to set up an example operation that I could then show people, and then start building from there. So whatever you have control over, Steve mentioned, do what you can with what you got.
I want to bring this session to a close by thanking you both deeply. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to have both of you here. With the experience and the expertise you have, you both deeply care about what you're doing. And the goal of this session was to pass on what we've learned to future generations. This is their planet. And anything we can do to share what we know and what we've learned to help them, that's what we're here for. So with that, I'm going to close this session and thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.